On Tuesday, October 2nd, Khashoggi was in Istanbul with his Turkish fiancée to pick up paperwork from the Saudi consulate they needed to get married. His contact inside, someone named Sultan. At 1:14 p.m., a camera showed him going inside while she waited outside with his 2 cell phones. The building has 5 cameras, but so far there is no footage of him leaving. Also significant, according to Turkish officials, earlier that same day, 15 Saudi men flew into Istanbul on 2 private jets. These images purportedly show them at 2 hotels in the city. More detailed information, including their birth dates and the exact time they cleared passport control, was leaked to a Turkish newspaper. Officials identified this man as an expert on gathering DNA evidence and dissecting human bodies, which they believe supports the theory they shared with the New York Times that one of the men, quote, dismembered his body with a bone saw they brought for the purpose. Turkey also says Khashoggi was wearing an Apple Watch inside the consulate that was linked to one of his phones. They're now examining that data for things like his heart rate and location. Black vans were seen leaving the Saudi consulate on October 2nd, one of which went to the residence of the Saudi consul general. And finally, Turkey says flight records show the Saudi men left the country at the end of the day. And no one is watching this closer than the Washington Post. Today, Khashoggi's colleagues published a full-page ad in protest, along with this video version. Their simple, resolute message: demand answers. How to respond to this will obviously be a big test for the United States, and the CBC's Keith Bogue is watching that from Washington. Keith.
Well, Rosie, the latest is that President Trump says he'll be calling the Saudi monarch, King Salman, soon to talk about it. But so far, Trump has been cautious both about jumping to conclusions as to what happened and who's responsible, and also about what responsibility the U.S. has to Khashoggi. Listen to his comments from yesterday as he alludes to the fact that Khashoggi is not a U.S. citizen, and then bridges to the economic relationship the U.S. has with Saudi Arabia.
First, I want to find out what happened, and we're looking. Again, this took place in Turkey, and to the best of our knowledge, Khashoggi is not a United States citizen. Is that right, or is that right? He's a permanent resident, okay. We don't like it, John. We don't like it, and we don't like it even a little bit. But as to whether or not we should stop $110 billion from being spent in this country, knowing they have 4 or 5 alternatives, 2 very good alternatives, that would not be acceptable to me. Okay.
So that's not a hard-line response. That's a soft-line response. But it's consistent with what Trump has said in other contexts about the Middle East, that on his watch, the U.S. is not going to lecture other countries or tell them how they should live.
Okay, yeah, he gave that message, I guess, on his first trip overseas, which incidentally was to Saudi Arabia, and he was trying to make a point by doing that. Are there worries about how any of this will be interpreted now?
Well, indeed, there have been. Essentially, the worry has been that Trump was signaling that human rights were not going to be a big deal for him. Other world leaders have sometimes taken similar positions in foreign policy, but the difference with Trump is how much he seems to actually admire some of the most authoritarian leaders in the world. Here's what one Canadian-based observer told the CBC Today.
Developing these budding relationships with these dictators is really quite something. That often happened in the back room, and now it's for all to see. So I think it is shaping and emboldening many of these governments like Saudi Arabia to take on these hit jobs, knowing that, or thinking that, the Americans are basically going to look the other way.
So the question may be, Rosie, does this incident only further encourage the view that Trump is indifferent to human rights abuses in other countries?
Keith, thanks for this tonight. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Canada's Prime Minister was asked about the Khashoggi affair today.
This particular case is, of course, of concern, and we join with our allies around the world in expressing serious issues with these reports. Obviously, there is a lot more to uncover on what happened here, so I'm not going to comment too much on this.
Trudeau also reiterated that Canada will call for human rights to be respected around the world, including in Saudi Arabia. The comments come as Ottawa's relations with the kingdom, though, remain tense. There's a Canadian angle on this story, too, and it involves a Saudi Arabian dissident who now lives in this country as a permanent resident. In fact, we told you recently about Omar Abdulaziz, a Saudi activist granted refugee status here in 2014. He said his family in Saudi Arabia has been jailed because of his outspoken views. And the Citizen Lab at the University of Toronto found that Abdulaziz's phone was hacked by powerful malware. The most likely culprit was connected to the Saudi regime. So Omar's concern was how many other activists could have been exposed by that hack.
You know, I have friends from everywhere. Maybe they were listening to every single call that we had. They were listening, they were reading our chat.
Now Abdulaziz is speaking out about Jamal Khashoggi, and Wendy Mesley, host of The Weekly, is here for more on that. Wendy, what have you learned?
Hi, Rosemary. Yeah, Omar says he has been friends with Jamal Khashoggi for years, and that several months ago, Khashoggi confirmed that to a producer here at the National. Omar says he had communicated with Khashoggi using that infected phone during the time that it was hacked, and that during that period that they talked critically about the Saudi regime and about a project to counter its online propaganda, that Khashoggi even had plans to come and meet with him here in Canada. He didn't want to appear on camera to talk about this, but we do have some audio from him, and here's what he said.
And yes, Mr. Jamal Khashoggi, and I'm sorry to say that, he was contacting me via my cell phone, the one that was hacked. So I'm pretty sure that they were listening to the interviews, they were reading the conversations that we had.
I talked to Ron Deibert about this, the head of the Citizens Lab, again today, and he confirmed that if the Saudis did indeed hack Omar's phone, which he believes, they would have had access to not just chats, but emails, texts, files, the camera, everything. And he says that Omar and other activists have reason to be concerned about the consequences of this kind of spyware.
Okay, and you'll have lots more, obviously, on this story on The Weekly, Sunday morning at 11. Thanks, Wendy. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Rosemary.